Speaker, I rise to make my humble contribution on Budget 21 debates. Permit me at the outset to extend congratulations on two fronts. Firstly, I wish to offer my congratulations to the Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance, Dr. Ashni Singh, and his team for their hard work in compiling the 2021 budget. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, permit me on a personal level to extend best wishes to Mr. Abhay Kumar Datadin, my father, who is celebrating his 78th birthday today. Happy birthday to Dad. Mr. Speaker, two of the speakers on the opposite side have raised some issues which I will attempt to summarily address. Mr. Speaker, I believe everyone has received an extract from the budget speech which you had alluded to. It states very clearly that Dr. Ashni Singh said, Mr. Speaker, before I close, permit me only to acknowledge the tremendous efforts made by all my colleagues in Cabinet and their respective staff who exerted tremendous efforts in preparing the submissions. It goes on, Your Honor, to finally, I trust I would be forgiving for saving the last word for my own team at the Ministry of Finance, and it continues. Again, Mr. Speaker, the common thread of trying to rewrite history, of trying to invent facts in the face of clear, unambiguous evidence continues. Mr. Speaker, if I may deal with the comments that were made by the honorable member that the economy, when the People's Progressive Party came to power, was meteorically growing. The economy, Mr. Speaker, ought to be separated from the non-oil economy and the rest of the economy. The non-oil economy, Mr. Speaker, was in free fall, declining by 7.3%, with most sectors collapsing. Sugar contracted by 3.7%, forestry by 8.1%, fishing by 17.1%, gold by 7.8%, bauxite by 41.2%, manufacturing by 8.6%. Your Honor, Mr. Speaker, I apologize. We have numerous things to mention. The Ocean View Hospital, the barbershop, which we'll get to in more detail. The honorable member who spoke before me said that the People's Progressive Party, Civic, did not consult before the budget was presented. Mr. Speaker, that is simply untrue. There were consultations with all sectors, including other political parties. They consulted a wide range of the private sector, the labor movement, and other political parties. If the opposition does not want to attend consultations, Mr. Speaker, then how can they be consulted? The budget, the honorable member said, does not include a big vision. The people of Guyana has grown accustomed to big things. Mr. Speaker, that's rubbish. Not a single project of any significance could be highlighted to have been done under the APNU government. The budget, it is said, does not include anything to indicate the pandemic is under control. Mr. Speaker, if you compare what was inherited by the PPPC government when they came in, what the number of test kits there were, how many tests were being done, versus what is being done now, Mr. Speaker, it's chalk and cheese. The budget, the honorable member said, focuses on wealthy people instead of providing adequate relief. Mr. Speaker, it was that side of the House with the 400 taxes. It was this side of the House that removed them. Mr. Speaker, this budget, Mr. Speaker, is entitled A Path to Recovery, Economic Dynamism and Resilience, a most fitting and apt title when we consider what has to be undertaken by this government. Mr. Speaker, I will seek your leave to focus somewhat on why a recovery is required. It is important, Mr. Speaker, to recognize this is the largest budget in the history of this country. $383.1 billion. Even more remarkable is it is done during a pandemic, a worldwide pandemic. And Mr. Speaker, if that were not remarkable enough, it is done with no new taxes. We add to that, Mr. Speaker, that not only is it presented when there is no new taxes, but this government just reversed 400 odd taxes that had been in existence before under the APNU administration. And it is still the largest budget in our history. Mr. Speaker, under the APNU government, spending was unchecked. We will get to how that happened. But, Mr. Speaker, we are not a wealthy country, not yet. Mr. Speaker, what the last administration wanted the people to believe is that when it rains, you would go outside with buckets and get crude oil, that you would go outside with buckets and money would fall from the sky. Mr. Speaker, that is not true. That could not be true. We must manage that resource, Mr. Speaker, so that we may progress. This budget, Mr. Speaker, is part of a mandate. When the PPPC went to the polls, they did so with a manifesto. They put for 5 years what they were going to achieve. The people supported it. Our president, Dr. Mohammed Irfan Ali, has said in this House that the manifesto promises must be met. They must be delivered upon. So this is the first step of following years where those promises are going to be delivered upon. Many of the promises that were made in that manifesto, Mr. Speaker, have already been delivered. The reversal of taxes, the provision of housing, water, roads, those have already happened. Now, but we must never lose sight, Mr. Speaker, that during the period of 2015 to 2020, under the APNU administration, The nation, suffered a period of taxation and spending to cause businesses in this country to suffer. So much so, Mr. Speaker, that the economy ground to a virtual standstill. Mr. Speaker, it is worth remembering that the period between 2015 and 2020 under the APNU government was characterized by a wanton disregard for the rule of law. The written law, as it exists in our volumes, like the purple volumes there, Mr. Speaker, were powerless against the perverse and obtuse interpretations lavished upon them by the previous administration. The perverse interpretations of the Constitution and the Representation of the People's Act held this nation hostage and under siege. English language has perhaps never been under such a severe threat, being murdered daily on the state radio, on state television, in state media, and of course, by the special Facebook trolls who promote. The race was on, Mr. Speaker, to convince the people that 33 was not a half of 65. They were trying to convince the people that things which actually happened did not happen. The written law was treated as a fluid thing, being defined by the past administration in any which way they saw fit. When the legislation says you had to show the SOPs, they did that in their own way. When they said that you had to appoint a chairman of GCOM following consultation, they again did that in their own way. English was under threat, was not all, Mr. Speaker. Mathematics. The precision of numbers were under assault. We were told that what we knew all our lives and what the entire planet learns in mathematics was not true. The argument about the mathematical nonsense was professed firstly by friends and family of the government, and then rubber-stamped by the then Prime Minister Nagamutu, who told this nation that there was some challenge underway and likened it to a third umpire in cricket. Mr. Speaker, we have to recover. We must not forget that before we proceed, we have got to correct that which has gone before. We have got to put the economy on a firm footing. We have got to right the ship. Why we have to recover, Mr. Speaker? I have alluded to the perverse interpretations of law. We have to recover as to how those things are done. Simple English, there is now a reform process that will hopefully make things even clearer. The Caribbean Court of Justice had to correct what was done to appoint Patterson as the GCOM chairman. We had to go to the Apex Court for that. We had to go to the Apex Court in Ram and the Attorney General so that we could understand that 33 is the majority of 65. Now, Mr. Speaker, those were things that we knew before August 2nd. What? Well, if you wait, I'll tell you. Let's start with what was published by the Guyana Standard. Mr. Speaker, this was published by all the media houses. The Guyana Standard reported on the 9th of August that the government spent 40 million Guyana dollars on buying tickets for a Buju Banton concert. I mean, Mr. Speaker, I like Buju Banton as much as the next guy. But for the state to take its resources...
Honorable Member, I like Buju Banton too. But I'd like to hear you conclude. So could we get someone to move an extension?
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask that my colleague be given 5 minutes more to conclude.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, you may continue.
Again, on the 9th of August, it was reported by Newsroom that we had a director of parks. He was paid $500,000 a month. The same person whose company was paid $500 million for Durban Park. It was reported on the 10th of August by Newsroom and Guyana Times, and on the 11th of August by Kaichor News, that APNU AFC government appointed 23 persons of their membership to be political advisors that cost taxpayers $7.7 million per month, and there was no evidence of any work being done. Following upon that, there was a report in Kaichor News that alluded to the July 20th, 2020 report that said SARA had spent approximately $600 million and had still not recovered a single paper clip of state funds. Money was being spent for what? Mercifully, the Attorney General, the Honorable Attorney General of this House, closed this agency and stopped the bleeding. On the 21st of August, it was reported that a member of this House received $4.9 million for the establishment of a non-existent barbershop. It follows a report that was made on the 25th of September in Kaichor News that $250 million of the SLED program cannot be accounted for. On the 25th of September, it was also reported by Newsroom that the former finance minister, Minister Jordan, transferred state lands to persons who did not want it, did not pay a cent for it, and he transferred it. And he also transferred it to persons who had only made a part payment, giving the state lands away. Mr. Speaker, we have to recover from that. On January 19th, it was reported that the former Minister of Public Infrastructure had received bangles. They published pictures, Mr. Speaker, of the voucher, which I made out to be $502,000. Now, Mr. Speaker, that report included a revelation that it was not only the bangles, they were household items, bed sheets. All of these were provided to the two ministers in that ministry. On the 8th February, it was reported that the wharf has been sold to BK for $20 million, Mr. Speaker, when it's worth $5 billion. Mr. Speaker, there is no way that those excesses with the $93 billion in public debt could be taken on board and we not right the course and then move forward. Mr. Speaker, that is why we have to embark upon a path of recovery. We cannot continue the excesses and extravagance of the previous administration. Now, Mr. Speaker, if we focus on the magnitude of the task that has to be undertaken, My colleagues will explain to the House item by item how it is to be done. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But what we must do is we have to account for what happened. We have to stop the bloodletting. Mr. Speaker, the rules were so fluid. It was as if they were written by Napoleon and Snowball, and this were Animal Farm. The rules were changing daily. We have to bring that to an end, Mr. Speaker. We have to start on the path to recovery. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.